On the heels of a celebration and a court storming, the Mountaineers bring things back down to earth, losing to UCF on the road in Orlando, 72-59. Now 7-12 on the year, 2-4 in conference play, and still winless outside of Morgantown, West Virginia. Mike Asti, I'll be joined by Ethan Bock here, our WVU basketball postgame show, as the Mountaineers drop another one. And they did have a span there of two ranked victories. Texas, when they were ranked, and of course, number 3 Kansas in Morgantown, a court storming, a big win for Josh Eilert and company, to say the least. Some then were talking about, okay, wow, was that the eureka moment? This team, minus Edwards, finally on the floor together. Maybe Kirk Risha, maybe Battle, maybe those players and the rest finally gelled together, and maybe we're going to see a different Mountaineers the rest of the season, at least going into the Big 12 tournament. Maybe then they could shock the world and win that tournament. Maybe they could do enough prior to that to earn some at-large bid and make people forget about the beginning of the season and buy game losses that at the time felt like backbreakers. But then, as I said, things get back down to earth. A loss on the road, but still a loss to a lesser UCF team, certainly in comparison to Kansas and Texas. So, Ethan, this was a game that going in, Vegas thought the Mountaineers were going to lose. 7.5-point dogs. They weren't at all fooled by Texas or Kansas. They were still thinking, okay, on the road, they can't win outside of West Virginia this year. It's an up and down season. Edwards may or may not play. He did not. They were still expecting the Mountaineers to lose and lose comfortably. UCF won by even more than that, and they really led throughout this entire game pretty comfortably, and pretty quickly were up 15 plus, and then kind of held that lead most of the way. Now, shooting percentage, it was about even, obviously, free throw wise, and the calls definitely did favor UCF. They hit their free throws. West Virginia did not. They also could not get to the line anywhere near as often as the Knights. UCF then was able to get the victory. What's the story of this game before we fully unpack from Kansas to now for you? Is it the officiating? Is it West Virginia just is really not as good as maybe some thought they were after the Kansas win? Is this a game that West Virginia played below their standards? Is UCF maybe better than who people think? What happened here? Because the balloon has been popped from just 48 hours ago.
Yeah, I think the story of the game is just West Virginia just coming off of that Kansas win, just had too much going for them, and I think they kind of needed a back down to earth moment. I mean, they got it. They could have carried their momentum after Kansas into tonight. And UCF was voted preseason last in the conference, but they also have some weird wins like over Kansas and Texas, just like West Virginia.
Yeah.
So this UCF's better than what they were voted in the Big 12. I also expected them to finish last, but they're clearly a better team than 14th in the conference. But
yeah, 12-6 now. So flip West Virginia's record pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, I think West Virginia they just had too much emotion after that Kansas win. They just put everything they had into that one game, and I just think going on the road, they haven't had a win outside of Morgantown the whole season. So I just think it was bound to happen for UCF to control this game.
Yeah, it doesn't feel surprising, but it's hard to hear your analysis and not have that then go to coaching, because obviously this is the first year for Josh Eilert. He's an interim coach. Everyone knows what he dealt with and the adversity that's going on. The staff is also young and they're great recruiters, but they were built to be under a Hall of Famer and learn from him, not to have a first-year head coach in Josh Eilert despite all the years as an assistant. But to have a letdown, an emotional letdown of such a high after the Kansas win that was also not that many days after beating another ranked team in Texas with another one smash in the middle there. So they proved that it wasn't just Kansas. They could also beat a pretty quality Texas team. To then have a letdown that you almost were expecting, what's the reason for that? Or is that an indictment of maybe this staff is not ready for this. Maybe they're not an NCAA tournament staff overall, to be honest with you. Maybe this shows that they can get you up for one game at home, but you're expecting 3-4 days later to be let down on the road. It's not like it was the next day. You would have thought now through the season they would be able to learn a little bit and be better suited for these environments, but it sounds like you were almost expecting this to be the case. Is that then not an indictment of the staff?
I mean, when you look at the staff, Josh Eilert clearly is a veteran in Big 12 play. Like he knows what to expect on these quick turnarounds.
Right.
But obviously he's still a rookie in the head coaching game, so it's a little bit different than being an assistant or video coordinator, director of ops. Every title he's had in 17 years at West Virginia.
Right.
But I think it's just having the guys ready in a way of I think the great coaches in the Big 12, they know if West Virginia was in this situation with them, like under Scott Drew, Bill Self, they know how to get their team prepared off of an emotional win or a letdown. They know how to quickly turn it around and flip the script. Bill Self, after they lost to West Virginia, what did they do? 48 hours later, they go and beat Cincinnati at home. They control that game. So then they didn't let upset by WVU turn it into a losing streak. And clearly West Virginia has talent on this team. They're not obviously meshing together at all. But they have talent on this team. And then with emerges like Pat Suminick over the last month, like you would think something would turn around. And obviously the coaching staff just didn't have that script to just flip and turn the Kansas win into momentum and just go on a winning streak.
And that's what I think fans were hoping for, maybe holding out hope for, and some optimists thought maybe could happen because, again, the bye game losses, as bad as they still are, and they're on your resume, fair or not, it wasn't this roster. That was back when they had 8 scholarship players and barely could go to the bench, and Kirkrisha's still suspended in battles dealing with the NCAA. So once you get the 2 of them, you have the emergence of others, and you actually have a bench to go to. You would figure that this team here wouldn't have lost those bye games. So if you have a couple ranked wins, you're better than what you were when you lost the bye games, and you could actually build on it, maybe beat UCF on the road, even if they're not ranked. That would be a quality road victory. Do the same against Cincinnati, BYU maybe, even though they're now ranked. Get some more wins at least. Maybe the NCAA tournament is not totally out of the question. Certainly if you get some victories in conference play and then in the tournament. But now it feels like it is. I mean, you're going to look at the overall resume. The Kansas win is great. The Texas win is good. But bye game losses, and now you just can't win outside of Morgantown, West Virginia, whether it's out of conference play or in conference play. And these are losses to non-ranked teams that you're not just losing by a basket on the road. You're losing convincingly. That feels like it's a problem. And it also feels like, again, we understand all the adversity, and it's hard to say this as media or fan and not mean it. You got to feel bad for the hand that Josh Eilert's been dealt. He wouldn't be a head coach without the drama, but he's certainly been dealt a rough go in all the adversity that's been thrown his way. But it also feels like, you mentioned Bill Self and all the other coaches that are still in the Big 12 with their resumes. We can be honest, we get why Bob Huggins is no longer there, and in no way am I saying he should be back. He can't. It's his own fault he's not still there. It feels like this team coached by Huggins would probably not have had this result. Even if they lose, it would have been closer. They wouldn't have been down 15 in a blink of an eye. They would have at least probably won one road game to this point. Even if they lost the bye games, it wouldn't be 3-4 days later where you almost are expecting a loss after a big win. You'd be able to get up for these moments and better prepare. And maybe this is the script of why the season is kind of maybe the season here. Before we fully get into that, though, they did have a situation in this game that is creating some fans to maybe, I could say, run amok a little bit and argue that there maybe the fix is in. If you look at the disparity here in terms of free throw shooting, and certainly how this game was officiated, it's a road game in the Big 12. With Huggins or Eilert, it's hard to get a call, a road game in the Big 12. How do you feel about how this game was officiated, basically? A large disparity, a lot more free throws for UCF. Did that play a role? Did the referees have a tough day at the office? Did you feel like it was home cooking? What are your thoughts on the officials?
Yeah, I thought the refs they didn't have their best game. I mean, there was a moment where UCF's big man Diallo, he blocked Noah Farrakhan's shot, but he also had contact, kind of slapped him right in the face, and I mean, he put his finger up like hey, foul's on me, and the refs just they said it was a clean block, West Virginia ball. So I mean, the refs did miss a couple calls, but at the same time, I mean, you look at the free throw difference. Knights had 15 more attempts, but at the same time, West Virginia just dug themselves into a hole right away, turning the ball over. Just kind of the offense going back to the pre-Kansas offense.
Yeah,
And
21 of 25, 84% for UCF free throw wise. West Virginia 6 for 10, obviously 60%. So it's not like there's a difference that much in terms of actually hitting the shots. UCF just had a lot more free throw attempts, which certainly could be a difference in this game. But as you said, West Virginia also was down pretty big early before this really became a thing. So that's still your own fault to get in that hole, and you are in a conference game on the road. It's not like I believe the fix was in going in, but the home team you have to figure is going to get more calls.
yeah, that's just how college basketball is naturally. I mean,
Right.
the refs aren't. I really don't believe that the refs had the fix in on UCF.
This
But
isn't
it's
like
not.
they're doing this in Lawrence, like
No,
this, like a
it's
blue blood
just
they won in the tournament or something like that. They want to make a run. UCF, I feel like college basketball in the world in general probably would rather have West Virginia than UCF in terms of the fan base. Yeah, they're not fixing it in for UCF. I wouldn't think.
it's just natural. It's just natural to have the home team get calls more their way. It just keeps the rhythm going. Obviously, the fans start yelling at the refs. So it's natural for the officials to kind of lean towards a home team. But no, I don't think the fix was in for
Okay.
UCF to win tonight.
All right. Well, Ethan Bock has said it. So Ethan Bock does not think the fix is in. So that will make it now. WVU Sports Now does not think the fix is in. It is unanimous here for the outlet. I mean, again, it sucks when you have a free throw disparity as wide as it is in this game. But that's something that may have happened whether Huggins is coaching or Eilert's coaching. You got to hit free throws, but also, again, the Big 12 road game. That's just life. It would be the same if you're in the ACC or in the Big 10. Life on the road in a major conference, you're not going to really get the calls. They're going to get the calls. And they hit their shots, but they also had to lead most of this game regardless. 72-59, UCF does beat West Virginia. After the Kansas win and everyone stormed the court, the Mountaineers do let you down on the road in Orlando, in Florida, losing to the Knights here. Mike Asti, Ethan Bock, our WVU basketball postgame show. Hit up Ethan's game recap on WVSN. We also do have postgame reaction video, kind of surprisingly, for Big 12 on the road when we are not there, but it is on the channel. It is on the site from interim head coach Josh Eilert, and we'll have more of that, of course, tomorrow morning. But the other story of this game is a non-story in a way because it didn't happen, but reading the tea leaves, there were reports of some thought Jesse Edwards was going to play against Kansas. Then it appeared, okay, warming up, no, yeah, it's a road game, but now it's looking like he's going to play against UCF. Not seeing Edwards yet. I did see Eilert's comment about kind of emergency. It would have been an emergency situation for Edwards in there. Maybe we're having an argument that is maybe irrelevant because they're not going to make it anyway, but you could argue the rest of the season, every single game is an emergency if you're trying to get into the tournament this year. You can't punt the game after beating Kansas and said, well, okay, we're going to go ahead and lose a Big 12 road game, but we have the Kansas win, so it cancels out. No, you do have the bye game losses. You got to get some road wins. This is one of them that could have been for you because they're not a ranked team and we're preseason picked to be last. At the end of the day, doesn't play. What do you know about that decision? What do you make of what Eilert said about it? When do you expect Edwards to play? If that's not an emergency because they, I guess, are okay losing a game after beating Kansas and that cancels out, what then is an emergency? And does that now trigger Edwards playing? that just feels odd that we've still not seen him when there's been a lot of people reporting this is going to happen. We're now almost a week later, still no Edwards, and now they've lost another game that is, quote unquote, a bad loss, even though it's on the road.
Yeah, I think some fans don't really understand like what exactly Eilert means by emergency situation. I mean, yeah, if you look in West Virginia's
Right.
trailing the whole entire game, yeah, emergency situation, Jesse Edwards should come in and play, but that's not the case at all. Emergency situation, what Eilert means is if Pat Suminick, Cook, Quinn Zielinski, any big man on this roster that can play the five, if they foul out and they desperately need a body to go in there, check into the game, it probably would be Edwards. So, I mean,
So it's more of a health thing. Does that lead you to believe, though, that Edwards is not even close to 100%?
I don't think he's at 100% at all. I mean, he would have played if he was at 100%.
I guess,
but
yeah, right.
I mean, he warmed up against Kansas, but he was using his left hand pretty much the whole time, doing post drills. Occasionally, he would use the right, but he was still high fiving teammates with his left hand only. So you can tell it's not 100%. Josh Eilert's mentioned he's done 5-on-5s in practice, but like when guarding players, he's not comfortable using his right wrist, right hand. So he's not. I can't really tell. It's hard to gauge really if he's close to 100%. But I mean, if he's warming up, if he's getting back into basketball activity, I mean, there's a chance he could play against Oklahoma State. It just depends how this week goes.
And you have more time now. This is even going to be a longer span from the Kansas game to now the next game. So you had a few days. Now you're going to get really almost a week, not a full one, but you're going to go from Tuesday to Saturday for the next game. It's also on the road at Oklahoma State. It's a winnable game, but I'm sure they're not going to be favored, and we'll see. To fully unpack the debate over what Eilert means or should even mean in terms of handling an emergency situation, it sounds like for you, it's fully on health, and that might even be what Eilert's meaning here. He's not fully healthy, so he only would go in if we truly need the body, not worrying about the record or trying to make the tournament, etc. Granted, fans are going to care about that. I even get caring about that. But my then question would be, if it's fully about health only, and we're not worrying about pushing Edwards into a game he's not ready for just to try to save the year, then why has it felt like he's been close the last several games if he's not 100%? And what is the limit that would get him in a game if he's not 100% and he maybe could have played a few days ago? He now would be emergency. We're doing it off of health, not off season record. Is he 80% now and we're a week or two away from 100%? What needs to get him to 100%? Is 100% the bar, or would we play him at 85, 90% if you're the Mountaineers because of the season? If this point, if you're Edwards, what do you even want to do? Obviously, you can't answer that, but the season's winding down. It's almost a lost year now for him individually, let alone the team. When do you think, being close to the team and covering the team, we are realistically going to see Edwards, and what do you make of what would be needed for him to play? Is it literally 100%, even if that's 3 weeks from now? Why do you think you and your colleagues are reporting that he was going to play 3 days ago if now we're learning he's not 100%? That seems like maybe that was jumping the gun.
Yeah, I think safe bet would be Saturday against Oklahoma State, because he gives a whole week to practice. He just got the brace taken off last Friday. Just getting that right wrist mobile again. He hasn't had any mobility since he fractured it. So just kind of getting back into the basketball activities as well. I don't think they ever expected him to play against Kansas, or maybe even today against UCF. But at the same time, Josh Eilert's had the conversations with Jesse Edwards about playing. And Eilert's made it known it's more about his long-term career than this the current team's record. I mean,
I get that, but
they're 7 and
why do
12.
you think they had conversations with him less than a week ago about maybe playing if he's not 100% and it's only about his long-term health? It feels like that was maybe too soon to have those conversations if you're not worrying about pushing him in there to save the season. In retrospect,
Yeah,
at least.
it could have been too early, but it's a different situation, I think, now for Eiler because it's
I just get why the fans are confused, to be honest with you. I don't
yeah,
always get
yeah.
why the fans think what they do, but in this, I think fairly I do understand why the fans are confused. The way that this is by ourselves, and then even the way the program has handled this, it's almost like they got people excited for 3 games now, and then you keep getting let down by him not playing.
Yeah, I think it's a different situation for the whole team, just based off of you had Pat Suminick playing well over the last month.
True.
He was averaging 11 and 5 in his last 6 games, so he's playing his best basketball that he's had since the Ohio State game, and it's not like it was before when they had Suminick, when they had a Cook, and you really didn't know could they hold down the center position because they really play the 4, so it's a different situation, I think, for them. So I think for Eiler, it's why rush into this.
It makes sense not to rush him back, especially because this year is obviously not going to be a Final Four year, no matter what goes on here. I mean, realistically speaking, this coaching staff is coaching for their jobs. Ren Baker's going to evaluate this in the offseason. It seems unlikely they would be back, barring a conference tournament run. They probably know that too, but also they do care about these kids. They're nice people. They're nice guys. They know this, and this is also about Edwards' future 100%, or anyone on this team. That's why there was a conversation months ago about even if Battle wants to play, despite even being able to, because it is about your future. But I do also get why that contradicts so many of the thoughts that he was going to play days ago, and maybe that was ahead of the gun. Regardless, it now feels like Oklahoma State could make sense because, again, that'll be then a full week from when the first report came out and from when he first started kind of taking shots before games and being more involved with the team. However, do you expect him, when he does play, to be slow dripped and play 6 minutes only off the bench, or to be back fully in there? Obviously, this team has to gel, and I'm going to ask you in a moment how they may look with him fully in there. But if you were expecting him to slow drip and play, say, 6 minutes or so and barely get in, and then maybe the next week he plays 12-15, and then beyond that maybe can get back to what he was earlier in the season, then it feels like we're slow dripping to the point that you're running out of games.
Yeah. I don't think they would bring him back just to play 6 minutes.
Okay.
I would expect either he gets his full minutes back, or they slowly bring him back into it with 18, 20 minutes, maybe a little bit more. I don't think it's going to be something that's really – I don't think it's going to be like in a Cook situation where he's playing 8 minutes and he's in basketball shape at some point. It's not like he went a whole off season and was hurt. He played
earlier
games
in the year, right? A Cook was a situation where that happened right as the season was about to start. So he's coming off of the off season. They don't really know how he's going to be. They have more to know from Edwards, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, Edwards is way ahead conditioning wise than a Cook was. So I think it'll be a little bit different. Maybe he gets limited time, just kind of getting back into it, as they'll probably still evaluate his wrist when he comes back, obviously. So maybe limited time at first, but I wouldn't be shocked if by game 2 he's playing back to what he was, 30 plus minutes a game.
Yeah, and again, I'm not expecting 30 plus minutes a game 1, but there is a point that I'm interested to see what the minutes are, because if they're in single digits, then you got to wonder, okay, maybe that 6-minute output should have been in this game, and then you can get to the 12-15. So if you're really slow dripping it, you are, again, going to run out of games here, whether it's for him individually or for the team. But regardless, this team is 7-12. They're 2-4 in conference play. They have yet to pick up a victory outside of Morgantown, West Virginia. Ethan Bock, Mike Asti here, and back down to earth despite coming off of the big win that got national attention, got local media, got regional coverage. It's not just West Virginia fans, by the way, to be fair about this. There were some media members nationally, again, locally, regionally, that were saying, okay, West Virginia finally has a crew, even with Edwards not there, but when you get him back, this team maybe could make a run. I wouldn't want to play the Mountaineers now. They're a totally different roster than lost the bye games, even though that's unacceptable for the program. And yet now it feels like that was a lot of jumping the gun because now they came back down to earth, losing this road game, 72-59, even without Edwards. When they do get Edwards back, if we're believing that maybe Oklahoma State on the road the next game is the possibility, regardless of the minutes, certainly if you believe he's going to play some legit minutes, how is this team then going to look with Edwards on the floor? How is that going to change things? Could that make it better because now they're coming off a pretty bad loss? Could that actually disrupt things and ruin, say, a moment like beating Kansas? We've always talked about this team needs time to gel when they change the roster. They're going to be changing the roster again coming up here. Whether it's Saturday or next Tuesday, one of the days, it's going to change. How do you think the Mountaineers look now with Edwards? And does that in any way paint any type of glass half full take that could exist for the rest of this year? Because that then would finally be the roster that after the Huggins drama, the staff re-recruited, kept certain players, added others. That would then be the roster with transfer class players that they were supposed to have all season long, finally into, at that point, almost February.
Yeah, we're almost into February, and this team still hasn't had a game altogether. When
my birthday is the 26th. That would be the day after my birthday, by the way. They would then hit the full roster from 6 months earlier. Yeah.
I mean, when Edwards got hurt, Raekwon Battle was sick and didn't play that UMass game. So they had their window earlier on, but this team, I don't it's not going to be as drastic as Creesa, Farrakhan, and Battle being inserted into the rotation, obviously.
Okay.
It's going to affect Pat Sumanek, Akok, Quinn Slazinski, just the front court roles, I think. Because Josh Eiler has many options here. You can either throw Sumanek at the 4, keep Akok in the starting lineup at the 4.
I was going to say, wouldn't you want to try to get Sumanek still to get some minutes here, regardless whether it's lineup or outside? I mean,
I think Pat's your best shot as a backup 5 if Edwards gets into foul trouble or kind of needs a game or two to really get back in the 30-plus minutes. But I think you have to start Sumanek just based off of just not killing his confidence. Like, Pat's clearly a guy that plays off of his confidence.
Well, and that's the defensive strategy. If I'm going against the Mountaineers, it's the same thing that happened back in December. I'm trying to get Edwards in foul trouble.
Yeah.
Like, that has to be the goal.
It'll be try to get Edwards in the foul trouble. But if that happens, you shift Sumanek to the 5.
Yeah, unless you'd rather face the Edwards who's not 100%. I don't know. Yeah.
You just can't you can't kill Sumanek's confidence. He's played really well with the exception of tonight. But just he's a guy that plays off of confidence. You've seen the first season and a half he had at West Virginia when he was getting limited minutes. He wasn't that great. But then once Edwards was out and he was given 20-plus minutes into 30-plus minutes, he played really well. So confidence did a lot for him. But it's going to be interesting what Eilert does because you can shift Sumanek to the 4, but at the same time, he also needs to play that backup 5 role. Same situation with Akok. And I mean, I expect Quinn Slazinski to kind of keep his same role right off the bench, that 6th, 7th man role. And their bench could obviously get deeper if they move Cook or Sumanek back to the bench when Edwards returns.
Ethan Bock, Mike Asti here, rounding it out. WVU postgame show. The Mountaineers lose 72-59 to UCF. Kansas win. It's what it is. You storm the court, and then on the road, the Mountaineers. I could arguably say, too, and obviously the bye game losses are the worst losses, not only this season, but arguably since we've both been alive for Mountaineer basketball, certainly this century, you could argue the end of the 10-year prior to John Beeline that some older fans want to bring up. It was really bad then with an 8-win season, obviously. But since then, those by-game losses are probably the worst losses for any Mountaineer basketball team in general. Separate from those, if we move those aside for just a second, this might be the worst the Mountaineer basketball team has looked since, 2-3 years ago in that really, really bad year with Huggins. That probably is the only other example, because you have a situation here where Battle throws up 5, Carcretia 9, and that actually was one of the better performances in this game. You mentioned Sumanik 0 for 6, nothing on the board in terms of points. Ironically, Wilson does throw up 7, which is a high game for him most of this season, oddly enough. Farrakhan with 8, Zielinski with 7, Akuka Cook throws up 7, and Harris leads you with 15. This is just doomsday all through the lineup. If somebody would tell you what's going to be their worst game, this is it for most of these players. So you could scrap it and say they've proven they're at least better than this as a group. Certainly not even just the Kansas win, but the Texas win, and even prior to that. And even they play better against Oklahoma, regardless of the result. But do you feel like this is an aberration? Do you feel like this maybe is a sign of it could be this bad, regardless of Edwards? Like, they do have a feast or famine situation here. Before we close this particular postgame show, how was it this bad in this game? I get the letdown and a young staff, and maybe they were too high off a Kansas win. I get they struggle to play road games, which maybe is indicative again of a young coaching staff. But this is the worst game for almost all of these individual players collectively on the same night.
Yeah, they couldn't buy a basket if your name's not Josiah Harris or
Harris,
Kirk Risa,
they
Seth
scored,
Wilson.
correct?
Yeah. I mean, none of these guys could buy a basket. That's what I
mean. And
mean.
Kirk Risa, by the way, was 3 for 10, so this was not fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, he scored 9, but it only looks like a good game because Battle was so bad.
Hit multiple threes, even though it wasn't the most efficient. He at least hit multiple threes, and that's what they needed to at least kind of stay in this game. But it's like I said at the beginning of the show, coming off that Kansas win, that was the best basketball they've played all season, and it wasn't even close. And the defense wasn't even that great. They still allowed 85 points, but the offense against Kansas was day and night compared to tonight.
That was UCF. A better offensive output than any West Virginia game the last couple of years, even the tournament team last year. I mean, 91 points. That was insane. I mean,
they couldn't miss. It was anything. Everything was going in for them. Sumanik obviously was controlling the paint, and then Battle, Krisa, they were hitting threes. So it's hard to stop this team when they're actually gelling inside and outside offensively, because this team hasn't been a good offensive team, even with Battle, Farrakhan, and Krisa back, and they've been back for a month now. So I don't think it's a question of gelling anymore, because they've had a month to gel.
Yeah, I mean, I get gelling, but you can't take a whole season to gel. This isn't the NBA.
Yeah, you can't take the whole season, even though they're all from different levels of college basketball. I get that, but there's a lot of teams that deal with that same issue. If they
that was the case last year. Eric Stevenson was there after. I mean, last year's team was in the exact same situation, and they didn't win 20 games, but they made the tournament off of a very similar schedule here. And I know they had a Hall of Fame coach, but they had to gel for a while. They won the games they should win in out of conference play, and then once they started gelling, they were better, and they still lost some games they shouldn't have lost. But the gelling excuse only goes so far. I think now that we're almost in February, you cannot still be using it.
Last year's team was able to gel in November. Like that Portland trip, they beat Florida by 30.
Sure.
Gave Xavier a game on the road.
The Purdue game was a good sign.
Yeah, they gave Purdue a good game.
Right.
They had 4 or 5 transfers. 4 from the Power 5 level, JUCO and Jimmy Bell, JUCO and Mo Agee. They had guys from all over the place, and those guys were able to gel. So it's not a matter of gelling at this point.
No, it doesn't feel that way. But again, you go from 23, 20, and 15 for Battle, Sumanik, and Grisha to 9, 5, and 0. I mean, Was that what UCF was doing because they're better than what people thought and it's a road game and they had free throws and the calls didn't go West Virginia's way? Or was it just a really bad day at the office for the Mountaineers? It's harder to not believe that that's the case because I get UCF's better than what people thought, but a team that beat Kansas and beat Texas shouldn't go from a 20-point score dropping to 0. He still was taking shots. It shouldn't be that much of a drop off based on the defense of UCF.
It shouldn't be. UCF has way better defense than Kansas does.
Right.
Their center,
100% they do.
I think UCF center Diallo. I think he's a way better defender than Hunter Dickinson at Kansas. So yeah, it's kind of both. West Virginia had a terrible day at the office offensively, but at the same time, UCF's, I would say they're a top 30, top 40 defense in the country.
Okay. All right. To round things out here, Oklahoma State, Cincinnati, and BYU are the next 3 games. We talked about maybe Edwards is going to play, when he's going to play, how many minutes he's going to play. If you're slow dripping him over, you're legit playing him. They're now going to have some days here in between, whether it's practice or they just want to kind of get the stench off of this game before Saturday on the 27th against Oklahoma State. The games then will get a little bit more clumped together. But what do you expect out of these games? What do they got to do in these games, in these particular matchups here? And obviously BYU's a ranked team, but whether you want to say emergency for health or for the season, unless you're punting the year altogether, and this staff cannot do that because they want to keep their jobs. Oklahoma State and Cincinnati, you certainly got to win one of them, if not both. I mean, those are winnable games prior to then facing a ranked team again. And I get the Oklahoma State games on the road. Cincinnati's at home.
Yeah, you absolutely can't lose Saturday against Oklahoma State. I mean, they're as we're recording now, they're still winless in the Big 12. They just have not been able to.
They're 8-10. Yeah, overall.
Yeah, they haven't been able to turn that corner under Mike Boynton. So even on the road in Stillwater, they've struggled in Stillwater a few times. But
wouldn't be shocked if they're an underdog. West Virginia is.
They probably barely will be an underdog just based off of
3.5 something. Like that, yeah.
But you can't lose Oklahoma State and Stillwater. That's a quad 3 loss, even though it's on the road. So it would add in another bad loss. You have to win that game.
Yeah,
I would say you have to go 2-1 in the next 3. Take care of either UC or BYU at home. Preferably for West Virginia, they got to win all 3. But it's the Big 12. They're not. That's hard to win 3
or 2 or 3. I mean, I think you could argue, you could probably maybe take the BYU loss, but it is at home. But yeah, I mean, 2 out of 3. You just can't keep losing. I feel like
no. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. They have no even by last month they had no wiggle room like they have last season where they could.
And are you going to beat Texas twice? Losses. Because after BYU, it's Texas. Yeah, they're not ranked anymore. Better. They're still they're playing better. They're very talented. By that point, they might be ranked again, and it's impossible to believe you're beating them twice in the same year with the worst West Virginia team we've seen in years. That's just hard to believe, but that would be the case you'd have to put forth after BYU. Then it is TCU, but then you're getting into the gauntlet again, where it's Baylor on the schedule, UCF again. Maybe you split with UCF because you have this result and you're certainly better than what you put out here. But then it's Iowa State, who's now ranked, Kansas State, Texas Tech, who's ranked, TCU, and then you finish with Cincinnati. The end of this is easier than the beginning of conference play, but you're still going to meet 4 ranked teams, and probably Vegas will only favor you in maybe, honestly, 1 game. If that, you could argue being an underdog in all these games.
It seems like every single season, West Virginia gets set with the first 5 games being an absolute gauntlet, and it always ends up with Kansas in there somehow. But this year it was Houston, Kansas, K-State's playing well, Texas. Right. They now looking like the down part of beating Kansas and then bringing Edwards back here at some point is the schedule gets so much easier.
Yeah.
In Big 12 standards, like usually
by Big
all
12
these
standards,
teams,
yes.
By Big 12 standards, it's much easier. You still have a bunch of quad 1 games that you're playing because every team's net is within pretty much top 75 with the exception of Oklahoma State and West Virginia. But this schedule gets so much easier, and they have the opportunity to at least make this interesting. They could get the 500 if they really play their best basketball here in the next couple weeks, and they have that opportunity still. But I mean, they have no wiggle room for losses anymore. They're at 12 losses. It's got to get to the point where they almost would have to lose twice in the next 6 weeks, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, and you're not just losing, but if you want to get nitty-gritty into KenPom, you're having teams cover the spread and almost double up the spread. So it's not like last year's team, for example, again, you lose by a basket in even controversial fashion on the road. KenPom may say, okay, that's a road game. It's hard to do. 50% of the country would have also lost that game. This here, I think they're very fairly going to be able to say most of the country would have at least put a better effort in, even if they would have still lost. Like, that's the situation that you're encountering right now. Again, 72-59, the loss at UCF in Orlando. The Mountaineers now 7-12 on the year, 2-4 in conference play, and without a win outside of the friendly confines and the wild and wonderful state of West Virginia. Ethan Bock, Mike Asti, that'll do it for this post-game show. Head over to WV Sports Now for all of Ethan's coverage of this game. That will include Josh Eilert speaking about this game. And then we'll have more as we get closer to the next game on Saturday, as there are days in between. So that you would then figure would allow us to learn a lot more about Edwards' availability and likely talking to Eilert yet again. We will have all of that for you as well at WV Sports Now. So the Mountaineers do come back down to earth after the court storming and after the big win over Kansas, losing on the road to UCF 72-59, once again leaving fans to wonder, is this season over? Probably. What are we looking to do the rest of the year? What is the point of the rest of this season? And how will this team look whenever Edwards does get on the floor? Because we are now almost in February, and literally the team that was recruited has still yet to play all together.